all of America's elite special forces. He has just written his own book called Team of Teams, New Rules of Engagement for a Complex World. In it, he talks about how leadership lessons from the battlefield translate to the boardroom. Listen in. Stan McChrystal, pleasure to have you on.
It's my pleasure, thanks.
So, when I look at leadership and I look at somebody like you, I think that this is a highly hierarchical leadership structure. The U.S. Army, you give orders, people listen. Your job is to appear imposing, inspire them, scare them a little. In your book, what you describe is actually a culture of much greater persuasion than I would have guessed. Is that really how the Army works? You're trying to persuade these guys? Aren't you ordering them?
Well, ultimately it is. I mean, if you think about it, everybody thinks that a sergeant tells you to do something and you immediately do it. And on the drill field, you might do that. In combat, soldiers are much more frightened of the enemy than they are of the sergeant. So they do things for their leaders and for their comrades. And ultimately, all the way up to their commanders, they are implementing because you have convinced them, or they're not. And so the ability to influence and persuade and build confidence in you as a leader and in what they're doing becomes the key task.
So when you looked at successfully functioning units, successful examples of leadership, what you found were not it wasn't the guy like Patton. It was a guy who really was able to win the trust of people.
Well, you win the trust of people, and then you unleash their initiative. Because one of the things you can't do is be everywhere. You can't make decisions. So what you want them to do is understand the situation and then have the will and the confidence to decide. I take my class at Yale every spring to Gettysburg, where John Buford, a 37-year-old cavalry division commander, essentially committed the Army of the Potomac to the most decisive battle of the Civil War. And he probably knew that he was doing that. What gave him the confidence to do that? He was not senior enough to make that decision. And what we really want in organizations is to have people confident enough in the relationships and confident enough in what they do to be able to operate that effectively.
When we look at the Iraqi army's collapse initially in the face of ISIS, I remember talking to a very senior American general who had been centrally involved over the last decade, and he said, the thing you have to remember is that Prime Minister Maliki in Iraq fired a lot of the generals and the colonels of the Iraqi army and put in place political hacks or people who were not well trained. And he then explained to me why this was so important. He said, because when you face a very dangerous situation, you're being asked to risk your life. You're not going to do it for a colonel whom you don't believe in, you don't trust.
That's fundamentally true in every army. And so your confidence in the competence of your leaders, but even more in their values and what they stand for. We used to have a saying in the military, is that a person who will come get you if you're in trouble. And if there's that doubt, then if you think about it, you're defending Ramadi and you're just not sure about that chain of command above you, it's pretty hard to make the decision that I will die out here if you don't think it matters and if you don't think you've got that support. So that's one of the most intangible but important things about any army.
Translate that in the business sphere. What is the lesson for leadership in most businesses?
Well, I think the same kinds of relationships matter. You go to an organization and they say, this is our vision. We're going to make the world better by producing this product, providing this service, and this is what we're about. And then, despite very good sayings, people see different behavior from senior leadership. They might see behaviors of greed, or they might see behaviors of different values, dishonesty and whatnot. And suddenly there's a difference between people, what they've said and what they actually do. That undermines the confidence of the organization. Then down inside the organization, if they think the senior leadership is uninformed, if the senior leadership says, we're going to do this, but the people at lower levels know the situation is vastly different, that undermines their confidence in their competence and their willingness to get down and find out what's going on. It's easy to have happen as organizations get big and senior leadership gets pulled in many directions outside to the markets or customers and whatnot. But you can lose touch inside your organization.
Somebody wants to be a leader in their organization and in life. What advice would you give?
if you want to be a leader, the first thing I'd say is it's going to take several things. One, it's going to take personal discipline. Most of us know the right thing for a leader to do at any given moment. I will go through a day, and there are moments when I'm not a good leader, but I knew it. As soon as it's over, I knew I didn't do it. It was a lack of my own personal discipline. It wasn't that nobody had taught me or I didn't instinctively know. The next thing is empathy. And I don't say sympathy, but the ability and the willingness to try to turn the lens around and see it through another person's eyes. You're out digging foxholes and you're suddenly dealing with Private First Class Smith, and he's got some problems at home or any issues. If you can't turn the lens and at least appreciate how he sees things, or if you're across the table from senior Pakistani military and you can't turn the lens and appreciate that they have a different view, you don't have to agree with it, but just the willingness to turn that lens around and let it inform you, then I think you have problems. So if you do those basic things, there are a lot of other skills that you learn, effective speaking and posture and all those things, but those core fundamental, almost value-like traits are the key.
Stanley McChrystal, pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much.